Afternoon is portfolio questions, and this occasion the portfolio is social justice and housing. I'd invite members wishing to ask a supplementary to press the request to speak buttons during the relevant questions. And I call question number 1, Stephen Kerr.
To ask the Scottish Government what projection it has made of the cost of welfare payments after 2030.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
Social security spending is an investment in the people of Scotland, providing vital support to disabled people, unpaid carers and children and families in poverty. The current forecast for social security expenditure in 2030-31 is £9.3 billion. That's around £2 billion more than the funding we will receive from the UK Government through the Social Security Block Grant Adjustment. The additional investment is less than 3.5% of the overall Scottish Government resource budget. The Scottish Fiscal Commission published a fiscal sustainability report in April 2025, setting out long-term projections for devolved public spending through to 2074-75. By the very nature of their projections being over almost 50 years, there are inherent uncertainties in those projections.
Okay.
The inherent uncertainties are down to this government's whole approach, which frankly is highlighted, or was highlighted last week by the Auditor-General when he warned that this SNP government is papering over the cracks with one-off savings and underspends, a short-term approach that is not supporting fiscal sustainability. Now, Audit Scotland reports a £4.7 billion funding gap by 2930, including £2 billion from rising welfare costs and no clear plan to manage even the £770 million overspend on adult disability payment. And, Presiding Officer, Scotland cannot afford this benefits bill. So does the Cabinet Secretary agree with the Scottish Conservatives that the only sustainable route out of poverty is work, not ever higher welfare spending?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, not for the first time, Presiding Officer, Stephen Kerr fails to grasp the basic foundations of the social security system. Adult disability payments are there to support people with the additional cost of having a disability or a long-term condition. They are not reliant on a person being in or out of work. Indeed, adult disability payments support people by allowing them to be able to afford to have transport to their employment or support for their employment. That's what DPOs have told me exactly. And the overspend he talks about around adult disability payment is because, as the Auditor-General has pointed out, we have a system that actually supports people to apply for what they are eligible for and is providing for people that were too timid to come forward to the DWP because they were in fear of the DWP system. Now, if Mr Kerr thinks we shouldn't spend that money from disabled people, then that's up to him to be able to explain that to the voters. But one thing this government will do will be to continue to support Scotland's disabled people.
A couple of supplementaries. First, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. While Westminster Conservative governments and Westminster Labour governments clearly believe that cutting benefits to disabled people and carers is a vote winner, I am proud that the SNP Scottish Government is leading by example and delivering a social security system based on dignity, fairness and respect, something that was supported unanimously in this chamber. Ahead of the UK budget, will the Cabinet Secretary commit to continuing to do all she can to protect the most vulnerable from further Westminster austerity?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I thank Claire Addison for that question? And once again, I think Stephen Kerr's original questions to me point out that he does indeed, and the Tories do believe, that we should take money away from disabled people if he wants cuts in adult disability payment. But that is continuing under the current UK government, because we've already seen them putting in place cuts for disabled people through universal credit, which of course continues to be reserved. And also now within the budget there is threats and talks about changing the tax of mobility cars, which would again impact on people in Scotland. So there is a great concern, I know, from disabled people in Scotland that the reserved section that remains within our social security system will be cut and will put them at disadvantage and extreme difficulties.
And Rachel Hamilton.
Sorry, Presiding Officer, I have a question. Number 6.
Yeah. Okay, we move on to question 2, Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government regarding its plans for mitigation, how the UK Government's two-child benefit cap is impacting children in Clydebank and Milngavie.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
The latest data from the DWP in May 2025 suggests that around 1,500 children in Clydebank and Milngavie live in households affected by the two-child cap. The Scottish Government's national mission is to eradicate child poverty, and yet the two-child cap has been a key driver of poverty for children and their families in Scotland. And that is why, subject to parliamentary approval, applications will be taken for our two-child limit payment from March 2026. Our payment will keep thousands of children out of poverty and reduce the depths of poverty faced by many more.
Marie McNair.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the answer. It's appalling that so many children in my constituency have been scarred by this brutal policy. It's no wonder our plans to mitigate have been welcomed by so many. CPAG estimate that at least 30,000 children have been pushed into poverty because of the UK Government's continuation of this approach. Put simply, it's Labour's policy that these children should never have been born. Will the Cabinet Secretary continue to make representations to the UK Government in advance of the budget and call for them to find some compassion and end a policy that is harming children, hindering their long-term opportunities and life chances?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, indeed, it should not be for the Scottish Government to once again have to mitigate against the worst excesses of Westminster austerity, which is again what we are seeing under the Labour Government. The Scottish Government is not alone in asking the UK Government to end the two-child cap. We stand with the United Nations, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Save the Children and the Child Poverty Action Group, all making that call to ensure that the UK Government hear once again loud and clear that the two-child limit should be scrapped immediately. Because it must be remembered that although we can mitigate, we cannot scrap the cap here, and under Labour, the rape clause will continue to exist.
Question 3, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it considers that housing supply in Glasgow will keep up with the predicted 10% rise in the city's population by 2032.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallum.
Presiding Officer, Glasgow City Council, as the statutory housing authority, is responsible for assessing all tenure housing requirements locally as part of its local housing strategy, as well as keeping its strategy under review. The local housing strategy should be informed by a robust housing need and demand assessment, which takes into account key evidence such as existing need and supply and future household projections.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Glasgow has declared a housing emergency and has had this emergency since 2023. And unfortunately, the decision by the Government in the year 24-25 to cut the affordable housing programme by a quarter has had a significant effect on the pipeline of housing coming into the city. But today, the Council in Glasgow has approved a 5-year plan for the construction of almost 6,400 new affordable homes, 75% of which will be for social rent. They've also identified an additional series of sites that will allow for a further 4,648 homes to be developed. This cost will be £1.6 billion of capital investment at a stretch, but the core plan will be around £890 million. So would the Cabinet Secretary confirm that she will support that baseline plan and do what she can to push further towards that stretch target of £1.6 billion to get those additional homes? We need 11,559 homes built in Glasgow as a baseline.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. I would firstly want to say that I'm pleased to hear that this approach has been confirmed by Glasgow City Council. I think it builds on a reputation and an experience that Scotland has had in delivery of affordable homes, whereby, for example, this government has supported over 140,000 affordable homes being delivered since we came to government, and everything that the government's been doing, in particular with the Housing Emergency Action Plan, has been about understanding the need to step that up now and putting the funding in place to do that. And for this year, we've boosted Glasgow City Council's budget by a total of over £24 million to acquire properties, bringing them into use now, and that brings their total budget and their affordable home supply programme allocation to over £127 million in this financial year.
Thank you. Question 4, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is using the Scottish social security system to alleviate poverty amongst pensioners.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
We are delivering real support to pensioners across Scotland, investing around £157 million, helping approximately 880,000 pensioners stay warm over the coldest months. Unlike in the rest of the UK, eligible low-income households, including pensioners across Scotland, are also guaranteed support through our winter heating payment. We have issued over £33 million since launching the pension age disability payment to help mitigate the additional costs incurred by older disabled people or those with a long-term health condition. Meanwhile, pension credit take-up rates remain low, and I urge the UK Government to do more to promote this reserved benefit.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and I'm glad she mentioned pension credit, which is a key in supporting low-income households who are pensioners. It often goes unclaimed, the Cabinet Secretary indicated, and sometimes the criteria is also too restrictive. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, despite the fact that that's reserved, what can the Scottish Government do to assist the take-up of pension credit? And can the Cabinet Secretary say how the commitments on pension credit within the Scottish Government's paper, A Fresh Start with Independence, could ensure pensioners get the support they need?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, while responsibility for pension credit ultimately does lie with the UK Government and the DWP, we will continue to explore opportunities to raise awareness of this payment to the people in Scotland, once again doing the UK Government's job for them, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government is delivering a benefit take-up strategy. I would hope that the DWP would also be able to have a similar type of strategy, which would include pension credit. But as Mr Doris has highlighted, in A Fresh Start with Independence, we did demonstrate how the social security system could be improved. So, for example, the steps could be taken in the early years so that people receive pension credit that are entitled to it, such as issuing invitations to apply for pension credit to everyone as they approach state pension age, taking a proactive role to increase take-up benefits for those who are eligible.
Question 5, Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it last met the Director of Housing at Fife Council and what was discussed.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallum.
Following my appointment as Housing Secretary Presiding Officer, I met with representatives of the 5 councils facing the most sustained housing pressures, and this included Fife Council on the 10th of July. We discussed Fife's local housing emergency, their affordable home supply programme, temporary accommodation and homelessness pressures. And following the development of the Housing Emergency Action Plan, I will now meet with local authority leaders on a quarterly basis, and that's alongside the very regular engagements that my officials are having.
Annabel Ewing.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer, and I'm pleased to note that there is indeed regular engagement. I think that is most necessary at these times. And what I would say is, whilst the Scottish Government has recently carried out a local adaptations policy delivery review and indeed more than doubled the funding available to local authorities, I fear that my constituents see no improvement in Fife whatsoever. In a recent case, Cabinet Secretary, where a constituent had been diagnosed and treated for cancer, it has taken Fife Council over 1 year to even carry out a survey, far less to install a wet room and shower. So, Cabinet Secretary, surely that is unacceptable. And can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what can she do to impress upon Fife Council the need to bring their failing processes up to scratch to ensure that people can live safely and with dignity in their own homes?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am very sorry to hear of the difficulty that Ms Ewing's constituent has been experiencing, and I personally send them my best wishes. The Government wants everyone who requires an adaptation to be able to access that quickly and with ease and in a way that meets their needs, and that's why we increased the RSL adaptations budget to £20.9 million this year, as Ms Ewing referred to, and why we've committed to a general review of the adaptations system. However, in respect of her constituent right now, I would be very pleased if Ms Ewing and I could discuss the details of the case so that I can make representations to Fife Council and find out how that can be progressed.
You have a couple of supplementaries. First, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. One of the key solutions to the housing crisis is empowering councils to purchase homes to create more social housing. A report last year found that Fife Council only purchased 4 homes in the Dunfermline area, and the council's buyback scheme was underspent by £3.5 million. There what more can the Scottish Government do to ensure that councils buy up more housing stock to create that more affordable homes for the area?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, whilst we focus on creating the right conditions for further development of affordable homes, we understand that we have to deliver more now whilst those are being built. And therefore, in the last few years, we've had a focus on funds directly to councils to assist them in both turning round social voids and acquiring homes on the open market, exactly as has been described. We made £40 million available for that last financial year. That delivered around 1,000 more affordable homes. And in my Housing Emergency Action Plan in September, we doubled that to a further £80 million. And I think, if my figures are correct, that has translated to a further £2.2 million for Fife Council alone, and I would expect them to put it to that use.
Thank you. And Willie Rennie.
I can agree with Annabel Ewing about the adaptations process. It does take a very long time for some people to get the adaptations that they need. But when she met Fife Council to discuss the affordable housing programme and other matters, did she give a longer foresight about how much money would be available to the councils so that they can plan for the future? Because I've never seen the housing situation in Fife as bad as it is now. And Fife Council are keen to get on with it. I hope the Minister was able to give them some foresight.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, one of the main representations that have been made to me is about the need for multi-annual certainty on funding, because that's essential to plan something which by its nature is multi-annual, like house building. And in the Housing Emergency Action Plan that the Government brought forward over the summer, we committed to do just that. And we also coupled that with a commitment of up to £4.9 billion over the next 4 years. So the Affordable Home Supply Programme is funded to the tune of £808 million this year. We've committed on a multi-annual basis up to 4.9 over the coming 4 years, and I'll be working very closely with councils to make sure that that added certainty can result in increased delivery, because I know our communities need it.
Thank you. Question 6, Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions the Housing Secretary has had with the Public Finance Minister regarding the consultation on permitted development rights to support the provision of new homes.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallum.
Scottish ministers have regular discussions regarding matters affecting our shared portfolio interests, and clearly there's a considerable crossover between the Minister for Public Finance and I. We meet regularly to discuss the planning system in respect of housing, and we most recently did so at the Housing Emergency Action Plan Oversight Board on Thursday the 30th of October.
Rachel Hamilton.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Because house building has plummeted under the SNP, and to reverse the decline, I have long campaigned for extending permitted development rights to unlock opportunities to grow the rural economy in places like my constituency in the Scottish Borders by allowing redundant buildings, barns and steadings to be developed and transformed into much-needed homes. Has the Cabinet Secretary or the Public Finance Minister made an assessment of how many homes across Scotland could be created to address the SNP's woeful emergency crisis?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, on the contrary, the SNP government has a very strong record in the delivery of affordable homes. I mentioned in an answer earlier that we've delivered over 140,000 affordable homes since we came to government, 100,000 of which have been for social rent. That's 47% more per head of population than in England, and 73% more than in Wales. But that's not to say that there isn't work to be done, and that's why, in my answer to Willie Rennie, I was able to point out that we have, for the first time, offered multi-annual funding certainty. We have committed to an uptick in funding and a whole suite of developments, including in planning, including in permitted development rights, which I hope will help deliver the homes that we need.
And Emma Harper.
Thanks. On the back of that, Cabinet Secretary, I recognise that the recently announced Housing Emergency Action Plan committed to additional planning actions to accelerate housing delivery. So can the Cabinet Secretary speak to this positive impact which this is expected to have on the delivery of new homes in Scotland, and including in Dumfries and Galloway?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we need our planning system to ensure that the right houses are developed in the right places and to be a facilitator of progress and not a hindrance to it. And I have been having extensive conversations with house builders about their experiences of the planning system, as well as with the planning minister. And there have been actions that the government have been taking that are being delivered, not least the 23 actions in the Planning and Housing Emergency Delivery Plan, all now completed or underway. And in that Housing Emergency Action Plan published on the 2nd of September, there were a number of actions, not least me communicating to the heads of planning that I expect an emergency-led approach to be taken, that I expect proportionality when dealing with SMEs, and of course an important ministerial oversight direction where I will be observing the application of NPF4 and be able to intervene where needed.
Question 7, Michelle Thompson.
To ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to communities to promote cohesion and develop sustainable support networks for refugees and asylum seekers to help ensure their full participation in civic and community life.
Minister Colcap-Stewart.
Thank you. We are committed to supporting integration of refugees and people seeking asylum into our communities through our new Scots strategy, which was developed in partnership with the Scottish Refugee Council and COSLA. We are funding the Scottish the Refugee Support Service to provide advice, information and resources to new Scots and to help them build networks and social connections. In addition, the £300,000 of funding this year that I announced earlier will be used by organisations working across Scotland to strengthen community cohesion, ensuring our communities stand together to reject division and build solidarity by forging coalitions across a wide range of communities in Scotland.
Michelle Thompson.
Minister, for that response. Falkirk has seen sustained anti-refugee protests and counter-protests resulting in ongoing tensions, disruption and division within the wider community. What actions are the Scottish Government taking to tackle the spread of misinformation, and will they work in partnership with Falkirk Council, Police Scotland and any other relevant agencies to mitigate the disruption caused by the persistent cycle of protests and counter-protests?
Minister.
I am deeply concerned about the harmful rhetoric that we are seeing actually across the UK, and that has no place in our society. And that's why it is absolutely vital that we remain united in the face of division and uncertainty, so that that narrative can have absolutely no place and it gathers no traction. It's therefore, when our communities are telling us that they feel unsafe and they're under pressure, it is our collective responsibility to listen and to respond. And I outlined earlier the work that we are doing through our new Scots Refugee Integration Strategy, which has been held up as a very good example far and wide. And we are investing in strengthening our communities. But I would call on members here and everyone, actually, to make sure that we all stand firm against not falling for misinformation, checking our facts and being mindful of our language and using our platform to make sure that we unite our communities.
Thank you. Question 8, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it anticipates to be the baseline figure for its ambition towards all-tenure housing delivery of a 10% increase in house building each year over the next 3 years.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallum.
Presiding Officer, the Government has instituted a new all-tenure delivery ambition and working with the house building sector through close collaboration, we will seek to increase delivery across all sectors by at least 10% each year over the next 3 years. And as I stated at the Local Government Housing and Planning Committee on the 7th of October, the figure on which the delivery ambition will be based is the all-sector new build completions for the year to end June 2025. This was published on the 30th of September and the figure is 18,869.
Mark Griffin.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. It's absolutely a welcome change in government policy. We do need to dramatically increase house building across all tenures. I do think the Government could and should have been more ambitious than that 10% to address need. But the key point is that baseline the Cabinet Secretary sets out, because numbers in recent years have been so low. Can I just ask, as well as the completion figures, will the Government also have targets on approvals and starts, as well as completions, to give an all-rounded target to the housing sector? And can the Cabinet set out explicitly how many more houses the Government expects will be built as a result of this 3-year target?
Cabinet Secretary.
To take the latter point first, we expect 10% increases on that figure each year over the course of the 3 years. I will not set a target for completions and starts. Well, the target is for completions. I won't set one for starts, but we do monitor starts, and starts will be a strong indication of the number that will ultimately be completed.
Supplementary, Willie Coffey.
Officer, Mr Griffin must also surely recognise that one of the biggest barriers to delivering Scotland's housing fund is the dire economic mismanagement by his Labour colleagues at Westminster, about to be laid bare in the next few weeks. Could the Cabinet Secretary advise how damaging UK government policies such as increases to employers' national insurance and limits to legitimate immigration are directly impacting on our housing and construction sectors?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, UK policies are indeed hindering progress. Immigration is absolutely vital to sustain multiple sectors of the Scottish economy, including construction, and the UK Government's approach has completely failed to recognise Scotland's needs. Likewise, the hike in national insurance contributions. I'm sure all members across this chamber, when they are making visits across Scotland, are being told how damaging that is both to businesses and organisations, permanently uplifting labour costs as it does. But of course all of this comes atop the incredible economic self-harm of Brexit and inflationary pressures, which have seen construction costs be some 40% higher this year than they were 5 years ago, and I'm afraid is, as has been set out, just another suite of reasons why it will always be to Scotland's detriment to be governed by remote politicians in London.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow front benches to change.